right. What's up, everybody? Thomas here with Elderwood Games, and welcome to the stream or video if you're catching a little bit later. So basically, today I thought we'd go through what I've done wrong in the hobby. In our last video, I showed off my armies and where they're all at, what I've done painting-wise, and we talked a little bit about how I got into the game and how I kind of got started. But today I thought it'd be a good way to kind of start off this channel by talking about what I may have done wrong in the hobby, in my opinion. I don't really think there's necessarily a wrong way to get into a hobby, but I definitely think there's better ways to do it. And if I were to start over, I think I'd follow some of what we're going to talk about today. So when you're looking into getting into the wargaming hobby, specifically Warhammer 40,000, one thing that we can't ignore is just cost in general. It can be a very expensive army or a very expensive hobby, at least from the outside. Now, one thing I'll say about cost is that you definitely get what you pay for. You buy a kit, you spend a few hours building it, you spend a few more hours painting it, and then that unit is put into your army, in which you play 2 to 4 hour games with every single time. So the hour per investment, I think, is actually really good in this hobby, and it's something that you can be proud of. It's also there's some therapeutic aspects, there's some creative aspects, there's competitive aspects as well, across kind of the full gamut, in my opinion. So we're going to talk about price today, and we'll talk about some ways to maybe mitigate some of that and that sort of thing. So I would say before you do anything or purchase anything is to go to the Warhammer store or your local game store if they have some kind of paint night kind of thing where you might be able to get a free miniature to be able to paint and learn that you like the hobby first. So I have one of the free minis of the month that I painted up fairly recently. This is one of the Rattlebone guys from Age of Sigmar. Had a lot of fun painting him up, but this is an example of one of the free miniatures that you can get from Games Workshop. However, when you do the free painting session, which the Warhammer shops will do, you can choose between a Space Marine or a Stormcast Eternal, kind of the poster boys from 40k or Age of Sigmar, and they'll kind of show you how to snip it from sprue, stick it together, build it, paint it, the whole nine. And it's like a hour and a half, 2 hour session, at least at my shop. I don't know, it might be longer at yours, it might be shorter at yours, but at least the manager at mine does a fantastic job leading those, and it's a great way to just get an idea of what the hobby is going to be, because it's one dude and you're going to end up snipping a lot of dudes off of sprue, painting them up, and putting them on the table. So it's a good way just to get an idea of, okay, am I going to like the creative part of the hobby? Because that's going to be a pretty significant part of what you're going to be doing. So before you touch any, buy anything, pick up anything, I highly recommend going and doing that first. Then what I would what I think would be best to do would be just do some research on some different armies. You can go to YouTube, watch a few battle reports, and see what armies you like. You can go just to the Warhammer website and find some kits that you think you like and overall enjoy. Because I think the second or really in my opinion, the most important thing about the army that you choose is going to be its aesthetic. Do you like the way that it looks? Because you're going to be spending the majority of your time in this hobby is going to be building and painting this army. You're going to be having to look at these for a very long time, very closely. They're going to be on your hobby desk, on the tabletop for hours and hours. So if you like the way a certain army looks, I would say at least liking like 75, 80% or more of the range, that's a good sign that it's an army that you would be able to do the hobby side of, and probably be proud of painting and playing. The next kind of tidbit that kind of goes off of that is once you have an idea of an army or two that you really like the look of, is to watch some battle reports. Check out some stuff on YouTube of people playing these armies, because you'll get an idea, a rough idea of how the army plays, and if it seems like something that you enjoy. If you like the idea of getting up close and personal, then you might like something like World Eaters or Tyranids or Black Templars or even Blood Angels and that sort of thing. A lot of armies are able to kind of do however. So, Space Marines, for example, you can have a up close and punchy army. You can have an army that sits a little bit further back and does the shooting game. One that's a little bit more objective control focused. There's a lot of units. It's a wide range, so you're able to kind of pick and choose the direction you want to go. An army like Tau is a lot more of a distance army. So it's not wanting to get close. It's not wanting to get into combat. We have a few combat units, but most of the time you're going to want to stay back, shoot from a distance, kind of control the board from a distance away, and kind of pick up points and secondaries and that sort of thing. So 2 armies, very different way of play, but I would recommend kind of looking up some videos and watch plenty of them. Like, watch as many as you can to see how different people play them, and if it seems like something that you would enjoy playing. And if it's an army that you really like and like you want to build it and get the units that you want, even if you may not think you'll like how they play, just having an army that you're proud of and you want to collect that's totally fine as well. I started with Tau, and I don't regret playing Tau. It's still my favorite faction of 40k, but it's a difficult army to play, and it's a difficult army to pilot, and it's all about staying distanced. And if you're ever against like World Eaters, for example, or really any kind of melee punchy army, you're gonna have a bit of a hard time, especially if you're in like a really crowded table of terrain, to not be able to pick off stuff before it gets into your front line. But all that being said, aesthetics, numero uno. Super important when you're picking your faction. And then number 2, I would say, is play style. If you're going to be playing this game for a while, you're going to want to know that you enjoy, at least for the most part, you think you will enjoy what that army is going to do. Now, after you've done that and you've decided, I want to play Tau, for example. You're probably not going to, because a lot of people don't like Tau, and I can get that. I understand the hate. I just really like the mech suits, and that's pretty much the only units that I play. But my next advice is going to be to pick up the Army's Codex. Because what a lot of people are going to say to buy next is this book, the core rule book. And you would think, yeah, I need the core rule book to play the game, right, Thomas? No. Pretty much everything in this book and more is available for free on Warhammer Community. The only thing that isn't on Warhammer Community that's in this book is the preliminary lore of the world of Warhammer 40,000 and the individual faction lore. But your codex is going to go into even more depth than this book does on the lore for your chosen faction, and all the lore videos and podcasts on YouTube that talk about the lore. You can find exactly what you want to listen to watch, and get a deep dive on your chosen faction for $0, 0 cents. It's a nice looking book. I enjoy having like physical media to have up on my shelves and that sort of thing. But between Warhammer Community, being able to download pretty much everything in here, including the rules for Combat Patrol and the maps for Combat Patrol, the objectives and everything, which is what the like last portion of this book is. That's all in the Combat Patrol rules on Warhammer Community, and you can use those for your Warhammer 40,000 games, especially when you're just starting out and you don't have very much. So a lot of people are going to say to pick up this book, and I'm here to tell you I don't recommend it. It's a like $60 or $70 book, depending where you are. and unless you can get it cheaper at your local game store or online, that you don't need, because basically everything you could need and more is available online for free. So I would recommend it. I would say pick up your codex, and we'll talk through why. Your codex, nice Tau codex right here. This is going to have a ton of lore to start. Honestly, most of the book is lore and army showcase, with basically, I'm just trying to kind of flip through here so I can show you the rough percentages here. So, yeah. This, much of the book, is all lore. Introductory to Tau, lore, stories, that sort of thing, which is useful. It tells you, it also kind of shows you what different weapons look like and that sort of thing, and that's going to help you when you build. The next little bit is going to be just a showcase. So some cool, I'll show this one. So some army showcase. Sorry guys, I'm like having a hard time. So you get to see what fully painted models look like. So you can kind of get more inspiration on what you might want to do for your army. But still a pretty decent amount, a few pages, probably a dozen or so different images and that sort of thing. Honestly, great inspiration, gives you a lot of cool ideas. Usually follows lore accurate stuff, which is fine if you're into that kind of thing. I went outside of that, but still a lot of really cool ideas. And then the next little bit is the combat patrol. So this is specifically going to be the combat patrol that launched with your codex. And this will have your lists for that, your rules for those, and as you can see, just a little bit of, just a few pages, probably not even 20 pages worth of that. The next little bit is probably the bit that you're going to use the most, at least until you download the app and do the code, is going to be your data sheets. So pretty, honestly, Tau's got quite a bit, but still even probably a little bit less than the lore section. But this is where you get all your rules for your individual units. You get some images for your specific stuff, so you can kind of know what kind of units you're probably going to want to have, and get a little bit more inspiration on what units you're going to end up actually picking up and playing. Then the book closes out with your Crusade rules, which we'll get into that in a little bit. But it kind of closes up there. And then on the back page, you have your app code. Now, when you buy this book, I do recommend flipping through it, reading some of the stuff. If you're a lore person, that's definitely a reason to get into an army. But it's got a lot of really cool information, and you will need this to be able to pilot your army effectively and be able to use the Warhammer 40k app, which is what I recommend getting pretty much right after that, because you'll be able to use the code, download, and have your rules on the app. The app also includes all the core rules that you would get in the core rulebook to be able to reference very easily. So it's just another great tool to be able to do. If you're running with the free version, which totally understand, you'll only be able to have one list in there at a time, which is a bit of a nuisance. I personally do pay for Warhammer Plus because it's like, it works out to about $5 a month, so cheaper than most streaming services. You get full access to the app and all their streaming stuff. Not a plug, not an ad, but for me, I want to be able to have the most up-to-date rules, and excuse me, the most up-to-date rules, and just be able to work on it through the app without having to worry about third parties. But third parties, just to mention that, you are able to use other stuff other than the 40k app. There's like the new recruit app, which I use to kind of sketch ideas for armies that I don't have access to in the app. The app will allow you to make armies with the index, but anything that has a codex already, you'll need a third party or something else to work through. You can also use like Wikipedia, which has a lot of the rules and that sort of thing. But just as a warning, a lot of those will not update at the same rate as the 40k app might. So if you're a weekend player like me, a lot of times the data slates and stuff come out on Wednesday, and you'll usually see that updated in the app within 24 hours. Some of the other apps can sometimes take a little bit more time. So for me, I play on Fridays, so to be able to have that turnaround and just ease of access to the app to be able to have those in there and that sort of thing. Yeah, so that's basically what I would recommend doing next. Codex is just going to give you all the information you could possibly need to start deciding what units you're actually going to play. And my next one would be to get a unit of your army. I would say if you have a unit in mind that you are like, this is what I really want to play, you could get that. But I would recommend leaning towards a model or a kit that has multiple units. So like your battle line would probably be one of the better things to get, just because you're looking at about 10 models to build and paint. And the reason that I recommend that, so I'll just pull out the Fire Warriors for Tau. So this comes with 10 Fire Warriors. They can be built as strike or breachers. And then you get the drones and the support turret and that sort of thing. The reason I say doing this is that if you don't know what colors you're going to do, or you don't really have an idea of like your scheme yet, this gives you 10 chances at least to work on the color and scheme and that sort of thing. At least for me in my shop, we have a ton of dudes that hang out on the weekends and do hobby stuff, painting, building, and obviously playing. And a lot of them have been super great about letting people borrow paints, just to try stuff out and that sort of thing. So I hope that you have that kind of community. It's honestly fantastic. But if you don't, that's completely fine as well. Just pick a few colors that you are thinking about doing, or talk with people in your shop and be like, hey, I'm thinking about doing purple. What's a good purple paint to use? I personally use the Army Painter Fanatic range, I think is what it's called. Yeah, the War Paints Fanatic by Army Painter. And I just do that because I prefer the dripper bottles. And for me, I can support another local game store because the Warhammer store is my like gaming play store. But for other games and that sort of thing, there's another shop near me that I use. And I am able to support them by buying paint or board games and that sort of thing. So I kind of keep that balance between the two. And for me, I'm just not a pot, like the little pots. I can't stand them. I don't like them. I'm going to use one with the dripper bottles. And I just preferred Army Painter. It's just the one that I ended up going with. But pick up, a few paints that you think are going to look cool, and get to painting, build them up, prime them. You don't necessarily need the fancy Citadel spray primer. I actually use, where is it? I use this to prime all my minis. It's just the Apple Barrel matte paint from Walmart. It's like maybe $3 for this whole thing. And I was using it for other craft stuff before doing that, and I still probably have at least half of this thing. Sure, when you do a spray primer, it's going to adhere a little bit better to the plastic, but it's at the end of the day, it's black paint. It puts a matte finish on the mini, which is what spray primer does, and allows you to paint onto that matte finish to be able to paint with other paints. And when you're especially dealing with stuff this small and as kind of inconsequential, honestly, as your battle line, then you're going to be able to try out like 3 or 4 different paint schemes. One thing that I will also do, so in these, I always keep the extra sprue, so that way I'm a little bit more organized. And if I were to ever sell my collection, I have the added benefit of being able to say that, hey, you're getting every bit that came in the box, and you'll be able to deconstruct, reconstruct, whatever you need. But the benefit as well is to actually test on the sprue. So as you can see here, you got a bunch of shoulder pads. So those are the breacher shoulder pads because I built mine as strike team because I'm a little bit of an idiot. But it worked better for my Crusade Force to have the strike team instead of the breachers, so I stand by it. But got 10 things right there. You know, I will not use any paint, hardly any paint, to try out 10 schemes right there. Also on this, I got a couple of drone heads. Those are another great towel-like feature. It gives you a few different color by number style areas to paint to decide what colors you like. And there's been plenty of times that I've basically just, you know, I decided on the brown and green. That was the scheme I was going to go for. And then there was a point with my army that I was thinking about repainting them. And I thought about, what other colors would I like to do? So I ended up testing out on a sprue or two to see what else might work. And it's a quick way to kind of decide on color. And, you know, if you want your actual models to be the color and not worry about stripping and repainting and that sort of thing, then it's another way to basically get more bang for your buck for the model kits that you're purchasing. And, you know, you can just record what paints that you used for certain ones once you kind of decide which one you're going to do. So yeah, after getting the codex, I would get your battle line box, or at the very least, a kit that has multiple models within it. So that way you can test out a few schemes before taking the plunge. After you do that, at this point, you've painted your free mini from the shop, or another just miniature from some other collection or something. You've gotten your core rules offline, so you've gone to Warhammer Community, you've downloaded the rules, and you have a somewhat understanding of how the game is played. Then you've gotten your codex. You've decided, you know, what faction, you've picked your faction, you've gotten your codex, you're starting to learn your rules and that sort of thing. And now you've got a battle line unit. So now you have a unit of models, you're working on your color scheme. It's gonna, you know, you're gonna get better at painting after the first unit. That's just the truth of it. Everyone's got, you know, somewhat rough first units. I personally repainted mine. I have a few that are still from that kind of era, so to speak, of my original models. But you're on your way, right? And you've gotten stuff and you're ready to go. Now, what I would do is if you go to a shop that has like a teaching day, I would go to that. So at the Games Workshop or Warhammer stores, they do have like a play lesson, I guess you could say. You basically go, you spend like a couple of hours with the store manager, and they kind of walk you through the different phases of the game. At least at my shop, we usually do a HQ unit, so a leader unit and an infantry unit from the Tyranids Combat Patrol. And you just kind of do a quick little skirmish between the two of them. Gives you an idea of how to read data sheets and how to interact and some of the basic rules and that sort of thing. That way you kind of have an idea, do I like how this game plays? And you could definitely do this portion before picking your faction. Basically right after you paint your model, you could do this if you want. But for me personally, I think having the models to be like, okay, I like the hobby side of it, because honestly, like, you can find a lot of fulfillment just from the hobby side of it. At least like I kind of do. I really enjoy that side of it, and that's sort of what I find a lot of peace in. It may just be because I'm bad at the game, but for me, that's just kind of the way that it rolls. So yeah, learn how to play in that arena. And then what I would say do, if you're interested in Combat Patrol and you like the units that come in your Combat Patrol box, which I'll go grab one of mine real quick. you like the Combat Patrol format or want to have a smaller kind of way to play, the next thing I think might be the Combat Patrol box. I will say that I got this one for my wife because she wants to play Adeptus Sororitas, the Battle Sisters of Battle. She's not a big hobby side of the hobby person. She enjoys her crafts and that sort of thing. Mini building and painting wasn't really her thing, and I get it. I enjoy it, so I'm working on building up her forces for Sisters of Battle, so that way we can play together and that sort of thing. And with Combat Patrol, it does give you a way to play the game with some simplified rules that might make it a little bit easier to enter into kind of the greater world of Warhammer 40,000. However, if your box isn't something that you're excited for, I do not recommend getting it, because all that's going to happen is you're going to save money. You are going to save money on getting those units, but if you end up only using half the box, you're more than likely losing money on those models that are now just sitting on your shelf. And sure, you could sell them. Someone's probably out there playing them somewhere, or will pick them up off of your hands. But at the same time, for me, I play what I think looks the coolest, and I'll tweak when I decide that there's a model or a unit that I want to use in place of what I've gotten, and just kind of add to my collection in that way. For me, the Combat Patrols aren't the best. There's a few of them that I think are worth it. Honestly, the Sisters of Battle one is pretty decent, especially if you're going more of a melee build. It's got a lot of the stuff you're going to want anyway. So, in my opinion, that one's actually a pretty decent one. For me, either of the Tau ones are not the best. The old one had the Ghost Keel and the Stealth Suits, which was cool. But when I was getting into it, they had the Battle Force box, which was just a better deal. And by the time the Battle Force boxes came out, I already had 3 of the Stealth Suits too. So it was just sort of like, it would have just been a weird like duplicate kit and that sort of thing. And the new one comes with a Commander, Strike Team, I think Pathfinder team, and the Devilfish. And I hate the Devilfish. I hate it so much. I think it's so stupid looking. I'm so sorry to whoever designed it. I know that you had what you needed to do, and I'm sure that you achieved exactly what Games Workshop was looking for. I do not like it. I don't like hardly any of the like actual vehicles of Tau. The battle suits, obviously, I really enjoy, but the other ones I could do without. And I'm just probably never gonna build those kits because I just never want to use them. All that to say, if you're into the Combat Patrol and you think that maybe you have a friend that wants to get into it, that's a good way for you both to have a somewhat equal army force to play against one another. But what I would honestly recommend doing instead is building towards 500 points. Getting to 500 points doesn't really take too long, and if you have a friend that's going along with you, you guys are both going to get there at a similar rate, and it's going to be a really good time. And you're going to be able to play at 500 points. There's no real restriction as far as the game goes. As long as you guys are playing the same amount of points, it's roughly going to be a matched game. Obviously, if one of you is running, a 500 point model and the other one is running 5 100 point models, there's going to be a bit of a disparity. But I doubt that the first model you're going to get is the 500 point one. Honestly, with Tau, the closest thing to that is the Storm Surge, and after close to 2,500 points or more of Tau, I'm finally getting that one. So just get the small units that you like, keep pace with one another and that sort of thing. But at least at my shop, I was already playing games at 500 points with either friends that were also new or veterans alike, where I was basically learning the rules and getting a handle of all of that. So I would say if you're into Combat Patrol, get the Combat Patrol box next. If you're not feeling the Combat Patrol stuff, work towards getting close to 500 points. and then just play a little bit along the way. Because basically, when you first play, you're probably just going to be moving models around and basing everything off of your the core rules and your data sheets. You'll eventually work in stratagems and your army detachment rules and all that jazz. But when you're first starting out, just the basic stuff is all you really need. After you get to the 500 points mark, then it's kind of like it's time to kind of look and think, okay, do I want to continue? Do I want to continue with this army? Do I want to continue with this hobby? At the 500 points mark, you've probably spent, maybe around 500, probably less though. Most of the armies nowadays are sitting in that $1.50 to $2 range per points. So probably between $250, $400 you've invested in this hobby, not really including paints and snippers and glue and all that jazz, all that other outside stuff, right? Once you get to around 500 points and you've played some games and you have a little bit of your army under your boot, I think that's the point where you kind of look at it and say, is this the hobby for me? Because at that point, there's going back. When you get past that point, you're going to be able to like sell stuff off in the future if you want. But if you're not enjoying it and you're not really having fun yet, and you don't have a desire to get better or to have more fun by, adding kits or building your army further or that sort of thing, I think it's important to have that that introspection of like, is this a hobby that I see myself doing? Because if it's a no, then I think it's best just to, meet someone at the shop and, let them know like, hey, not my thing. Do you know anybody that is playing this army that would like these models, and be able to, sell them off for either what you paid, less than what you paid, that sort of thing. And then maybe find another tabletop war game. Star Wars Legion is one, Trench Crusade if you are into like the 3D printing kind of stuff. If you want more of a skirmish game and you like the 40,000 universe, you could look at Kill Team. I haven't personally played it. I just got the box for the Ravagers, or the Raveners. Yeah, the Raveners. And the Hormagaunts and the cool Tyranid terrain. Like it was definitely well worth the getting the box for all that. But and maybe it's just 40K isn't for you, and that's completely fine. I'm sure if you're watching this video, it is for you. But that is my kind of take on getting started in the hobby, and kind of what I would recommend is like the beginning stages of your 40K journey. Now, with all that being said, I think it might be appropriate to talk through what I did wrong, which is kind of the title of this whole video. So let's hop into that. It was about September of last year, so 2024 at this point. And I was meeting a buddy for just some drinks, and we were chatting up, and he was saying that he was getting into Space Marine 2. It was the big game at the time. A ton of people were playing it, and it's brought a ton of people into the hobby. But at the time, I was like, I don't really think I want to get back into Warhammer. I played Age of Sigmar back in like 2016. I still have my stuff from that. But I just fallen out of the hobby, and I was kind of like, I don't think I want to get back into it. But he was sort of like, oh, it looks cool. I think, if I had someone to play with, I think I might get into it, kind of thing. And then I was kind of like, well, okay, if I had someone to play that I knew was going to play, then it might be worth it, and it'd be kind of fun to have a creative hobby again. At that stage, I was like kind of falling out of the tabletop RPG kind of deal. I was looking at making my own game, or also just finding a group to play with, and where I personally am not the easiest. And also with RPGs, I really like to play with my friends because it feels just more fun, like you can kind of be yourself in that aspect. Whereas like, wargaming and that sort of thing, even like Magic the Gathering, it's sort of like a hobby that you can kind of go and play and have a decent time. I think everything's better with your friends, but with some of these kind of like 2-player things, like it's a lot easier to pick up games and that sort of deal. So I was like, okay, well, if he's getting into it, then why not? Like maybe I'll just take a look into it. And I will say I did this part right. Is I looked into it, I watched a bunch of videos, how-tos, how Tau played, and that sort of thing, and I was just kind of like, okay, I want to get back into it, is basically what I decided. I was like, you know what, I'll get back into it. I got a buddy that's thinking about playing. I even reached out to an old college buddy of mine, and he was thinking about wanting to play because he was also playing Space Marines too. So I was like, okay, cool. So I'll get into it. I'll kind of lead the way, which is honestly typically how it goes for me and a lot of my friends, is I end up leading into a game, learning it, playing it, and kind of figuring it out so I can teach them. And as a forever DM, that's just kind of the role in my life, I think, is just learning games and teaching them to other people in hopes that they'll play games with me. A little bit of foreshadowing there. So I start getting into Tau. I get the stealth battle suits. They're just a quick and easy kit. And I knew I wanted them because they're really solid for their rules. When they guide, they grant rerolls to hit and wound. Even when it was the old pairing mechanic where you had to spot for a specific unit, it was still a great unit to use and worth every penny, in my opinion. Now they're even better, and there are points adjusted for that, which I totally understand. But that was my first kit. It was just a little kit. I have it right here. You saw them if you watched the last video. But yeah, just 3 little stealth suit guys, and they're drawn and that sort of thing. Really easy kit. Maybe took me just a couple hours to snip and put together. And I was pretty much immediately hooked. So as you know, I started in September-ish of last year. And now it is July of 2025. So 9 months-ish. In 9 months, I've basically got 3 full armies. And this is where the downward spiral started. So I got into Tau, and I was building Tau. And then I was like, well, no one else that I talked about starting this game with has bought a single model. And I was like, well, if I go ahead and buy into a second army, then I can teach them with an army that I have. And then that way it's not a financial commitment to them. And I will have people to play with. And I will get the added bonus of having another project that I can work on when I get sick of Tau. So in comes the Space Marines. Because I was really into the Salamanders lore at the time. I was also, my friends were already kind of looking at Space Marines for their potential armies that they were looking at. So I was like, well, if I get the army that they're thinking of, maybe that'll entice them to actually play. So I started building Space Marines. And that was all right. That was a lot of fun. I enjoyed, the Salamanders lore. I enjoy painting green, apparently. I actually don't like painting green. Green can be quite the finicky color, which is really frustrating, especially like the green that I use because of its like pigment. It doesn't really cover super easily, so I pretty much always have to do multiple coats. So not the best time painting wise, but still my favorite color. I'm still gonna probably paint everything green to some degree. So I start building Space Marines, and I get to a point where basically both Tau and Space Marines were around 1,000 points. I think I might have been at like around 800 on Space Marines, and I was maybe a little bit over 1,000 points with Tau. And I was getting really tired of painting armor because Tau is just big mech suits and Space Marines are just dudes in big armor. So it was basically like more of the same, even though my Tau are very clean. So they're, even coats, a little bit of shading, edge highlights, very detailed painting, which I enjoy. I do enjoy it, and I think it overall looks great on those miniatures. I think that it's what I prefer seeing on my towel. And then with Space Marines, I went a little bit messier, so they're kind of grimy, as you saw. Paint chips and the lava effect and that sort of thing. They're kind of my rush and fun kind of army to paint. But I was kind of like, okay, I'm getting really tired of painting armor. I need just something else, something a little bit more freeing that I would, something that's I'm excited to paint again. So, Tyranids. And my first Tyranids unit was the Biovore. Not because it's really good in game. I actually didn't realize that it's basically a staple in Tyranids list. I just thought spider with tank, pretty cool. And it's a really cool kit. Looks really cool. And I enjoyed painting and building it and picking my pink iridescent scheme. I just really enjoyed how those colors looked and worked. So I bought that one. And then I kind of was rotating between the three. So I'd get a Tau kit and then a Space Marines kit and then a Tyranids kit. And then it was pretty much the end of 2025 or end of 2024 going into 2025. I was like, okay, I have enough points to really start playing this game. So I go to the Warhammer store because it's the closest shop to me. And I do some pickup games, playing about 500 points, getting a handle on the rules and that sort of thing, and just, having a good time. Got to know a lot of the guys there. The manager at this Warhammer store is fantastic. Love Sean. He's such a great guy. A little bit of an intimidating looking guy, but he is really kind and just an awesome dude. And basically he was like, yeah, we just sit here, we paint all day, and we pretty much always have guys that come in for games. So, spend a day in here and you'll get your hobby fill. So at that point, I kind of just started going to this shop basically on a weekly basis. And now I go one time. I basically stay for the full shift on Fridays from 12 to 8, and it's just a good time. I get to play with some friends that I've made there and that sort of thing, but getting a little bit ahead of myself there. So I found a community, and that's the important thing because, I had friends that were thinking about getting into it, and they have their reasons, and they decided not to, and I totally respect that, and it's totally fine. I get it. It's an expensive hobby. It's a time-consuming hobby. It's one that I'm enjoying a lot of, and I'm glad that I found, even if it was through that kind of weird situation of trying to introduce my friends to it and ended up just playing it myself. But that's kind of where I found it. And this is one additional tip before maybe we close out today, is don't start Crusade until you have a force to do Crusade with. I started Crusade when I had about 1,200 points of Tau. And how we do the Crusade in our shop is basically every 2 weeks you escalate. So you start at 1,000 points, and then 2 weeks you go to 1,500 points, 2 weeks 2,000 points, and that's where the cap is. So you won't, unless you have an opponent that has the points too, you're not required to play anything more than 2,000 points. But it does increase to 25 and then to 3,000 after that if you're into that. I started at 1,200. So basically, I was rushing to get all my stuff built and painted to play. You don't have to have painted models to play. My personal conviction, I want to have painted models when I play. It just, to me, feels a lot more fun, and I enjoy playing with a fully painted army. So a little bit of that is completely on me. Totally cool. If that's your conviction, awesome. If you like to play with gray models, okay. And if you like to paint with prime models, that's fine too. Everyone understands that you're on a different stage of the hobby journey, and we're all cool about it. So I don't recommend doing Crusade if you don't have the force kind of all ready to be able to get to like where you need to. So basically, having 2,000 points to start the crusade, in my opinion, would make it a lot more fun, because crusade is a ton of fun. It's very narrative, and it's a great way to play, but there is a lot of homework. I actually have my folder with all my augmented crusade cards with all the abilities of each of my units, my Tau specific planetary invasion one, all these of that, my crusade card, I can't remember what this is called, but basically that lists your units and everything, and basically after you play a game you have to do like 15 to 20 minutes of homework to decide, did they get battle scarred? Do they level up? Do they get a new ability? What do the abilities do? How does that interact with their current rules? What am I going to do with my extra requisition points? Am I going to increase my force? Am I going to buy new abilities? Basically, a lot of stuff goes into it. And if you haven't got a few games under your belt where you like are really concrete in knowing how the game works, Crusade is going to add quite a bit to the game itself. So I would say maybe get to around 2,000 points and get as many games as you can under your belt before hopping into Crusade. All that to say that I highly recommend playing Crusade at some point in your 40k journey, and I think everyone should at least try Crusade because it is a really cool way to play. It's a great way to get into the community, because you're probably going to have more people participating in the events. My shop is actually looking to do the Armageddon Crusade here soon, so I'm really excited for that. And I'll probably do some little catch-up videos and stuff while we're going through that process, so that way you can kind of go along with me, maybe see some of the hardships of Crusade. I think that's looking towards the end of the summer, so look forward to that. But yeah, I think next week we might do a little bit of a faction deep dive, maybe sticking with this sort of beginner friendly stuff where we'll walk through some of the other factions, maybe talk through some of the factions that I think I might move to now that I'm thinking about selling off my Space Marines. So I haven't fully decided yet. I'm thinking I might wait until at least the end of July before really putting the hammer down and selling it off. But yeah, I think that'll be a pretty fun one. So tune in next week, and we'll kind of dive into some of the factions of 40k, some stuff that I like about them. We might not get too deep into the lore. I have some lore knowledge of some of the factions, but not a ton of them. So we'll kind of maybe just look at some models, look at some paintings of the different ones, and kind of see what would be just kind of cool to do. But thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy this, feel free to subscribe and do all that YouTube stuff and that sort of thing. And I hope to see you guys next time.